So thanks.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Jamie Russell. I'm from ZeroHour, which is the campaign for the Climate and Nature Bill. As Julian was saying, it used to be known as the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill, was a bit of a mouthful, then became the Climate and Ecology Bill, and is now the Climate and Nature Bill. We're hoping this is the name that, third time lucky, this is the name that actually sticks. I'm just going to whiz you through quickly what the bill does, and then I'll tell you a little bit about our campaign for the general election, if that's fine. I will just share my screen with you. Right, hopefully you can see that. So ZeroHour itself is the campaign for the Climate and Nature Bill, and the bill is a new UK law that's being proposed that addresses the full extent of the climate and nature crisis in line with the most up-to-date science. Now, given the audience that I'm speaking to here, I'm sure I don't need to tell you just how desperate things are in terms of our urgent need to tackle the climate and nature crisis. And here on this slide, it talks about it as the dual climate and nature crisis, and that's very much what the bill is all about. Is not treating climate and nature as two separate things, but actually realizing that we need a joined up approach to these interlocking crises in order to be able to do what we need to do. So the bill is currently backed by around 200 scientists from a wide variety of disciplines. Some of those scientists, including Professor Kevin Anderson, there on the right, were involved in the writing of the bill. It also has the backing of, at the moment, I think it's about 134 MPs in Parliament. And this is the point where it's really important for me to stress that this is a cross-party bill. So there are Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem, Green, SNP implied MPs who are all supporting it. So we are a non-party political organisation. The bill was reintroduced into Parliament in March by Alex Sobel MP, who's the Labour MP for Leeds, I think, if memory serves, with cross-party support, co-sponsors. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, well, why do we need this new legislation? Well, I mean, obviously, the government has its net zero targets, which we all probably are very familiar with. But the fact is that at the moment, the UK is off track. We're currently on track to meet the third carbon budget targets, but the fourth, fifth, and sixth, we're nowhere near where we need to be. And it's clear that the current legislation that we have isn't actually enough to get us to that point. In its day, the Climate Change Act was really groundbreaking, and as was the Environment Act. They're both, particularly the Climate Change Act, is now a little bit like myself. It's a bit old and grey, and showing signs of wear, and needs a little bit of an update. In terms of why we need to do this, again, even just on an economic level, the failure to address the climate and nature crisis is probably going to be more expensive than addressing it. I mean, very, very definitely. The photo here is from Germany a couple of years ago. You may remember they had really historic, amazing floods. I think the German government came to the conclusion that it cost around 40 billion euros to sort that out, and then factored in with some other climate impacts that were happening subsequent years in terms of heat waves and things like that. They were looking at a bill of around 80 billion euros. I live in Shrewsbury in Shropshire. We have the River Severn running through our community. What used to be once in a 100-year flooding events are now happening, frighteningly regularly, which completely cuts off one side of town from the other and has dreadful impacts on homeowners and businesses. So in terms of the Climate and Nature Bill, how can it help? There are really 5 main ways. And the first one is the reversal of the destruction of nature by 2030. The UK actually committed to this at the COP15 Biodiversity Summit in Montreal back in 2022. And this was actually not just to halt the decline of nature, which is what the Environment Act kind of looks at, but also to reverse it by 2030. So we signed up to that agreement, that COP summit, but we haven't actually got the legislation in place to do it. So that's one of the things that the CAN bill will do. The second thing is that it'll ensure the UK stays within its carbon budget for 1.5 degrees. I know at the moment there's a lot of scary conversations among scientists about the 1.5 target, but in terms of the legislation in the bill, it's purely focused on the carbon budget that the UK has for 1.5 degrees and making sure that we don't go beyond that carbon budget so that we do our fair share in order to meet the requirements of the Paris Agreement. And the third thing is, as I said to you before, understanding that climate and nature crisis needs a joined up approach. So we can't actually solve one without solving the other. And the solutions are largely interlinked. If you think of the carbon that's stored within peat bogs, one really clear example of the way in which looking after nature can actually help us solve the climate crisis as well. The fourth thing is the UK needs to take international responsibility. At the moment, we don't account for an awful lot of our emissions that we could kind of offshored. So the CAN bill would actually ensure that we did proper accounting rather than what some might say is a little bit of smoke and mirrors when we talk about what we're actually, how much of our emissions we've actually cut by sending them overseas. And the final thing is, as I'm sure many of you will be aware, the need to consult the public. And this is very much because the bill is so transformational. It will change every aspect of UK society, from how we move around, how we heat our homes and everything else. Then it really is important that we ensure that there is public buy-in for that. So citizens' assemblies are the model. The model is very much based on the one that was used in Ireland for sortition for the abortion debate. And it really is a little bit like a jury service. You bring people in, you pay them to be there, you let them listen to the experts. But the key fact is that it is selected at random, but the random element also includes checks and balances to make sure that the ultimate assembly reflects the diversity of the UK population. So in terms of ethnicity, age, gender, socioeconomic background. So it really does feel like a representative body. And that then can, after drawing up its conclusions, those are then presented to Parliament, and Parliament ultimately has the final say on what is adopted and what's not in order to meet the legislation of the CAN bill. So at the moment, as I said, we have 134 MPs in support. There are 365 councils across the UK of all political persuasions who've passed motions in support of the bill, 630 organisations, 40 peers, and I think the current tally is around 45,000 individuals who've signed up across the UK to say that they support the bill and would like to see it made into law. In terms of national organisations who are supporting us, there are some really big ones, as you can see here, people like the WI, Friends of the Earth, CPRE, Ecotricity, the Cooperative Bank, lots of different ones. So a real cross-section of kind of society and lots of really key allies in this regard. So traditionally, I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute and just get onto another screen. Traditionally, our campaign has been about asking campaigners to write to their MP and ask them to support the bill. What we're obviously aware of at the moment is that this is an election year and things are going to change, and whoever wins forms the next government, it's really we're really aware that there's going to be quite a big change. Lots of MPs are standing down, lots of seats are likely to change hands. So our focus now is how can we ensure that the MPs who form the next Parliament are ones who are going to be willing to support the CAN bill. Because in order for this bill to succeed, that 134 probably needs to become about 325 MPs out of the 650. And in order to do that, the campaign that we've launched is called The Nation Needs You. We had Chris Packham fronted it when we launched it just a few weeks ago. And it's very much focused on constituency level action. So people taking action within their constituencies and building up pressure in them on the candidates prior to the general election starting. So just let me find my next screen. And okay, so I'm just going to share this with you. Okay, so every constituency, there's 650 across the UK. For each constituency, we've set up what we're calling a constituency action page. And on this is the place where we're encouraging people within that constituency to show their support for the bill. So this is St Ives down in Cornwall. Some of this work was done previously by campaigners down there. And on the action page, you can see here are the candidates who are standing in St Ives. The Labour candidate hasn't been announced yet, so we're not quite sure on what their position is. There's an open letter here to the candidates, which asks them, basically, we'd like you to back the bill, telling them about who is already backing it, highlighting a local climate and nature impact that's actually specific for the constituency. So St Ives, as many places, has suffered devastating floods. and then highlighting to the candidates why they might want to back the bill, the actual co-benefits of the bill. So in terms of making people better off, making sure homes are properly insulated, cleaner energy, reducing air pollution, ensuring that our natural wild spaces are protected. So all of these wonderful co-benefits that come from backing the bill are kind of highlighted here. And then for individuals, they can sign up here. There's 190 people in St Ives have signed to say that they'd like to support the bill. But then what we're also asking is local organisations to express their support for the bill. So in St Ives, there are a series of councils from district council level all the way down to town and parish council level. But beyond that, supporters in St Ives campaigners did lots of work reaching out to local groups. So there's the local WI group, there's an environment group, a community farm, and this list goes on and on. They did an awful lot of work. Local XR groups, bookshops, art galleries. They even found some local kind of people, a local therapist, a local school. There's Patrick Gale, who's a local Cornish author, is on here. And the aim of this was really to show the candidates that they have broad support within the constituency for backing the bill. And this really is what our campaign is all about. We would like, in all 650 constituencies across the UK, for people to be able to show that their candidates have a mandate for backing the bill. So they don't need to worry about, is this the right thing to do or not? It's actually the voters are telling them, we would like you to take robust action on the climate and nature crisis, and we think that the bill is the best way to do that. And so what we're asking people to do is obviously sign up as individuals. That's wonderful. But we're also asking them to go out into their local communities, talk to the bookshops, the sports clubs, the faith groups, the churches, the climate action groups, the nature groups, the charities, and even the businesses, and ask them if they'd be willing to pledge support for the bill, because all of that puts incredible pressure on the candidates and makes them realise that they do have a mandate for it. When the candidates are approached by the WI, they really do sit up and listen, because everybody's scared of the WI, particularly candidates. If a local faith group goes to a candidate and speaks to them, the same, they sit up and listen, because they know that that is a group that is representative of a huge swathe of their constituents. So showing them that there is a mandate within the constituency is what this campaign is all about. And so, from our perspective, we're reaching out to groups like yourselves and asking them, can you sign up? That would be wonderful. Can you promote this within the constituency and just raise awareness about it, whether that's via social media, online, through your newsletters, or even, if you are running kind of, community events or stalls or anything like that, kind of having those conversations with people. We have campaign literature, in terms of posters and leaflets and all lovely stuff, stickers and badges and all that kind of wonderful stuff. There's a campaigner pack. When you sign up, you get access to a campaigner pack which has some template letters in terms of writing to an organization. So we've tried to take the hard work out of it for you, to make it really nice and easy. But what I will stress is, what really matters within a constituency, and this is why, we're, as a central team, we're reaching out to people in the local constituency, is those local connections really matter. So when I write to a church and say, you had the funeral of one of my relatives here, and, you might remember me or whatever, I'd like you to sign, I'd like to tell you about the bill, and would you like to sign up? You have that instant connection. When you go to your local bookshop and you speak to someone there and you talk about the bill to them, to the owner of the bookshop, and you say, are you interested? Do you think there should be better climate and nature action? Again, those local connections really matter. And it's something, that as a central team, we don't have them, but you do. And that's why we're really, hopeful that you'll be able to sign up and hopefully get some organizations locally within the constituencies that you're part of to back this bill as well.
Right. Well, so comments and questions, please, for Jamie. Thank you very much. That was a really clear and detailed presentation, Jamie. Thanks. Great. We're all speechless.
Yeah. There's a couple of comments in the chat quickly there. So Swindon Council has actually unanimously supported this cross-party. It was a very closely thing, but both parties agreed with it. Andrew said that Wiltshire has considered an earlier version of it. It hasn't passed, but maybe we can do more grassroots campaigning to get more groups on board, and maybe we got new people and we might try again, I guess. But it's all about parish and town councils, I think, isn't it? And how we get that's one community, but it's not only them, of course, it's everyone, as you're just saying. I think there's a lot we can do with parish and town councils. Is that a separate thing, Jamie? Or
no, by all means, if you have those connections, if you have the connections to town, to councillors, by all means ask them. If you have connections to local parties, if you're a local party member, Labour, Lib Dems, Conservatives, whatever, having those conversations are really helpful as well. And we have seen, local parties signing up, local constituency Labour parties, Liberal Democrats, signing up as a party itself locally, which is always, really lovely to see.
Bill next. Bill, unmute.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, and maybe it is still a question. I suggest at the end of this session we vote on whether we actually join, because I think we can get it going then if we agree to. But the first question is, will this pass in this session or next session of Parliament before the general election?
Sorry. So our focus is very much not on this Parliament anymore. We're very aware that it is the next Parliament that is the one where we need to put our focus, and it is in the next intake of MPs where we need to put our focus. And there is a real urgency here because, the Climate and Nature Bill itself has targets that are 2030, and whoever forms the next government is going to take us right up to the very cusp of that. So it really does feel like the moment is now or never to get this kind of legislation in place if we're going to meet those targets.
Okay. My second question, that's good because that means we can use it in our general election group, for example, and push it to the candidates. So that's good. The second is, do you believe, because you read it, the Climate and Nature Bill will deliver what you said in that graph through Parliament? Is it strong enough to ensure that all the things that need to happen will happen? Because a lot of bills that go through Parliament are weak as whatever, and they'll get them through because that gives them political points. And I'm just asking whether you actually believe this Climate and Nature Bill actually will do the job.
So when we talk about the Climate and Nature Bill, we like to say that it's a small bill with a big impact, because if you actually read the bill, it's very short. There isn't actually a lot to it. It's a framework bill. And by setting those targets that need to be achieved, then it really does become a question of how we're going to get there. And there are only so many, there's a finite number of ways, once that bill is made into law, there are a finite number of ways that we can reduce emissions in the time frame that we're talking about within the carbon budget, and a finite number of ways that we can restore nature in the way that's possible. And so what it really does is put, whoever is in government, when this bill becomes law, is really being held to account for what they're then doing. So I think my answer to your question is yes, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Before I ask on Keith, I've got a question in the chat. How do we get hold of your material? Now, could we get those slides of yours? Would you like us to send an email out about what you're saying, for instance?
Yes, that would be lovely. I put some links in the chat to kind of the general things. If someone was wanting to have the slides, I'm very happy to send the presentation over. Yeah, that's not a problem at all. I'll pop my email in the chat, and if they wanted to drop me an email about that, that's not a problem at all.
That's great.
And so Andrew, the ZeroHour stuff was put into the members meeting email that went out to everybody as well. So there is more information out there, and that'll be on the website too.
That's a good link to anyone who wants to get hold of the material. Is a starting point is the email that you sent out. Thank you, Bill, to announce this meeting. Right. Okay. Over. Your hand is finished, Bill, and over to Keith.
Hello, Jamie. I was sitting here absorbing more detail, thinking about my project to try and influence the general election that's coming up. And this is a question that may be difficult. Is there any evidence that candidates who declare to support the Climate and Nature Bill see a boost in their popularity with voters and the number of votes they then win?
That is a very good question, to which I would say it's probably too soon in this electoral cycle to know for sure. And I think that's quite granular. That would be quite a granular polling analysis to come to that conclusion, given how many factors there were. I would like to think that would be the case. I can only base that on the forgetting about electoral polls, but just seeing the surveys of people in the UK who say that climate and desperate for climate and nature action. So I would imagine that there must be some correlation there in terms of that. On the flip side, I would imagine that failure to address what is this huge existential crisis is probably likely to impact on the polls at some future point. But I'm not actually sure if there is data that could answer your question, Keith, I'm afraid.
Yeah, so it's a link between, because like there's some of those polls are beginning to show that if you ask people what the top 2 or 3 issues are, that climate and nature issues are in their top 2 or 3. And I thought it was something like 70% of voters say that, you know, that's in their top 2 of issues. It's a really bigger number than you'd think who rank action on the climate alongside, you know, cost of living crisis and immigration, etc. And yet that what struck me about the number I saw in one of these polls, it didn't seem to reflect the general story that I see coming through the media, which I find quite disappointing.
And I think one of the key things for us is really to explain to people that there are wonderful benefits from taking action now in terms of, you know, the cost of living crisis, in terms of cheaper energy, warmer homes, more sustainable food systems. You know, as I said at the beginning, the cost of taking action is far less than the cost of not taking action. And I think that's increasingly what economists themselves are beginning to realize as well.
Thanks. I'll comment on the politics and then a technical comment that follows on from it. So national politics is very challenging stuff. I mean, if you look at the polls, the polls of polls that say Reform Party is polling 3 times higher than the Green Party, that's an example of what I mean by challenging. Wiltshire Council, as I put in the chat, voted against supporting the previous version of this bill in 2021. The vote, I've had a quick look just now, was more or less along party lines. Lib Dems, Independents, etc., supporting, and the governing party opposing. I don't know if you've got any comment on where that puts us as campaigners for this, if we opt into this campaign in Wiltshire. Jamie, first.
I don't think that's really for me to comment on. I mean, our focus is very much on ensuring that there are candidates who are standing in the election who are backing the bill. And, you know, our campaign is not about telling people who to vote for and who not to vote for. Our campaign is just trying to raise awareness of the legislation and ensuring that more candidates are aware of it. Some, you know, some aren't, and if they are aware of it, that they actually take a position on it, because then that really does help everybody know.
Thank you. That's good answer, and it'll lead nicely into our very similar approach in the next item we're coming to shortly. But just a technical issue, it's not just technical, because of course the climate emergency is being caused by greenhouse gases, and I was unhappy to see in the draft of the bill the carbon dioxide equivalents taken from international protocols and in the Climate Change Act of 2008, for the specific reason that methane is undervalued as the climate forcing gas. So I wouldn't be happy to support this bill the way it's worded, because as you say, we have until 2030 to do this and that and the other to meet the climate emergency. Nothing we do on carbon dioxide is going to have much effect on the climate between now and 2030. Although we should do it, and we should do it very strongly for the future. And but things we do on methane, if it's undervalued in the bill because of these outdated carbon protocols and greenhouse gas equivalents, then passing this bill can actually cause a problem for climate emergency action, in my personal opinion. Don't know if you wanted to comment.
Well, I will start by saying that I am not a scientist, and this is not my level of expertise. The bill has been drafted by some of the UK's leading scientists, including Professor Kevin Anderson. But what I will do is take that comment back to the team, and if you wanted to drop me an email with your address, I will get you an answer from someone who is smarter than me. Shall we put it that way?
Thanks very much, Jamie. We're cracking on. Yeah, I'm glad we spent the time we did on that, but it's time to move on to reporting on our election candidate work. And I think that's over to Tony and Keith. Yes?
Yeah,
Can I ask Andrew whether we're going to just say in this meeting whether we're going to support this or not? So
Let's have a show of hands. Who would like to put a little hand up that Wiltshire Climate Alliance supports this campaign? I'm looking for my little hand to put up, or a manual hand, and I can one of us can grab a screenshot, and another one, because there are 2 pages. That's a lot of hands. That's great. Thank you. You can put your little hands down. And does anyone want to put in the chat or raise a little hand now to say that they wouldn't agree to Wiltshire Climate Alliance joining this, in becoming a member of this campaign? Or if you're too shy to do that, you're welcome to email any one of us in the steering group, or just contact at Wiltshire Climate Alliance, because you might have a valid reservation. Let's move on from that then. That's a straw vote. Bill, happy with that? Yeah?
yeah.
Massive support.
And I'd just like to say thank you to Jamie for coming at such short notice, and I'll be in touch about the methane and the materials and all the rest of it. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Okay, it's over to Tony or Keith without more ado then. Our election work, or your election work. You've been doing some.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, okay. So this is part of the work we've been doing is with ZeroHour. But just to say, the team have been sort of moving on, contacting organisations around the county and within constituencies. I have to say, Keith, chip in if there's anything I'm missing out here as I go along. But I think we've done a good job, I think, really begin to engage with county-wide organisations. But there are some gaps really in our constituency contacts. And really what we're saying on the constituency at this stage, because we still don't know when the election is going to happen. The rumour mill is now suggesting summer, but who knows? Let's see after the election, the local elections nationally. But we do need, what we're looking to do within the constituencies at this stage is just to contact, identify and do a standard email to organisations, schools, anyone who we think might be interested in participating in or helping to organise a husting or engaging with candidates. So in places we've got, WI groups, we've also got secondary schools, we've got obviously perhaps not every parish council, but certainly the larger settlements, their town and councils, and any other specific groups, obviously environmental groups. So we do have gaps around the county we're really looking to get some help on. And at the moment, really that is, in fact, we have a bit of a gap on Chippenham, Melksham and Devizes, South West Wiltshire and Salisbury. Now, I know there's one or two, there's good reasons for individuals who've been identified already who can't quite engage with that at the moment because they're busy. I think that goes for Bean, I think, Jez, who's engaged in a court case or something, I understand. But yes, if we're looking really for people to come forward just to help out, identify those organisations at this stage, send out a standard email, and then we can see what the responses are. So far the responses we've had Fairly mixed. A lot of them haven't responded, and I think that's really because there is no date for the election at the moment. So I think we're looking to do is the initial contact, and we can do a follow-up when we have something more certain. Keith, was there anything about that aspect you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was going to try and say a bit more about what we've learned in the last couple of weeks about support for the project from Hope for the Future. So, in our efforts to try and find like-minded organisations who were familiar with some of the things we're trying to do, which is engaging with busy parliamentary candidates and MPs to try and encourage them to meet with us meaningfully, help us to put together profiles and information packs about what each potential candidate's beliefs are and what their party's actual manifesto beliefs are around the climate. And then to try and get those people to attend a hustings event and organise it and get it over the line, make it happen. Communicate with the media to make sure that if you've done some profiles, it goes out to voters, you get a good turnout at your hustings, you manage the hustings effectively and produce an interesting media event, etc. All that type of thing is something this organisation called Hope for the Future has been set up to deliver. You know, their raison d'etre is to help citizens in the UK to communicate more effectively with their MPs and governing bodies around them in a way that can help them to bring about change more effectively. So they really like the project we've described to them because it sits right in their space where they're effective, and they've offered some useful support across the constituencies we've described to take this forward, and that would be to, you know, help put together candidates on profiles on the different candidates, help us with coming up what would be the key questions and the smart asks, they say, things that are likely to get people to really think about where they stand and whether they are going to support the climate. They offer training and support to any of our team to help them conduct themselves better in meetings with candidates and understand how to make a more effective job of delivering it. They've offered funding to support one whole hustings event, just one in one of our constituencies, helping to find the best location to carry it out, get it set up, making sure you've got someone there to deliver it, and then support the media. The bit I also really like is they talk about what do you do in the next 100 days following the election. So if you have managed to get the ear of a candidate and get them to say that they really support the climate, and then they end up sitting in the Houses of Parliament debating the climate and nature bill in a few months, the idea is that you maintain the relationship with that newly elected MP and hold them there to what they said and the sort of pledges they made about the things they do, to see that they actually do take some action to take things forward. So based on what I've learned so far, I'm in favour of getting this organisation to provide the support that I've just described, and we should sign up and say that the Wiltshire Climate Alliance would like to say yes to their offer and get on with it. So I think that's about where we are.
Yeah, no, it's really, really encouraging. I mean, there's a huge amount of support out there generally, but this is by far the most specific and I think targeted. And you know, they're doing a lot of the legwork that we would be doing otherwise. So that's even better, I'd say. Shirley, you've got your hand up.
Yes. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Right. I just wondered if there's any notion of a relationship to what Greenpeace have been doing with their Vote Climate campaign. Any mention?
Julian, yeah, I think Julian, you sat in on that, didn't you?
Well, I've got one or two contacts, but I haven't established anyone who's doing very much in Wiltshire. You may know more than me, Shirley. I mean,
no, I haven't followed it through. I didn't have time and wellness enough to do anything about 4 months ago when they started. We have run very successful hustings for what was the Chippenham constituency, with collaboration, as you know, everybody from Bradford and Avon through Melksham and up to Chippenham and Corsham. And we've had about 4 or 5. So we're quite practiced, really. And we've got permission. I got something from WCA meeting about 10 weeks ago that said, well, it's logical to hold something in Melksham because we're in the middle of our patch, our constituency. So we have actually begun to talk about that without any vote for the future input or any Greenpeace input. So I just wanted to mention that much.
Thank you. That's great. I mean, I think that's good to know. And I know that Royal Wootton Bassett have done hustings in the past as well. So I think there's some experience around the county. I mean, maybe it's, Keith, that's a good idea perhaps to ask everyone here if do they have experience of actually running hustings in the past? Because it'd be good to know what we can tap into, what's already out there. Anyone? Okay, no. Julian, you got your finger up.
Well, I need to say, yeah, I've got experience of running hustings.
Yeah. So basically we've got well, Royal Wootton Bassett is now South Cotswold. So if we can count on Shirley's experience from Melksham and Devizes, Bassett. So we got, and then the 2 Swindons. I don't know. Would you like to put them together, the 2, Julian, or would you?
Probably would. Yeah. So
that's good. So we've got a couple there. Salisbury. Anyone from Salisbury here? Margaret, have you done hustings there?
I've attended hustings, but never had any experience of running them.
Okay, but who run those?
Churches Together.
Churches Together, and that was that a general issue, or was that specifically around climate change?
General issues. They invited all the candidates and invited questions from whoever. So it was anything anyone wanted to throw at them.
Okay. Well, I think we are perhaps connecting with one or two, just seeing whether they have an interest in being focused specifically on that. I suspect not from what you're saying, but anyway. Okay, so we got a starter there, but the great thing is I said, Hope for the Future are there to support us doing those where we don't have that husting experience. So I think what I'd like to do is to find out who would be actually interested in undertaking some of that training about engaging with MPs, either face-to-face or through emails, whatever, but then also perhaps leading on to hustings. But don't forget, we got the 2 aspects we're looking to do here. One is which is really we want to get on with now, is developing relationships with these candidates, certainly the ones we feel are perhaps most serious and perhaps have a better prospect of getting voted in. Because by the time we get to an election as announced, they're going to be really busy. And so the window of opportunity of trying to engage with them and influence them is now, really. So is anyone interested in joining our steering group, who will, I'm assuming most of us will want to undertake that training? Any hands? I
just want to say I probably can't get into that, but I do occasionally succeed in having meetings with Michelle Donnellan about more often about specific local issues. And one thing I have learned, if you're writing to an MP, it's possibly a good idea to keep it brief, but make the subject say where you stand on an issue, because the MP isn't necessarily going to read it, and certainly isn't going to read your whole long elaborate argument that proves.
No, I think they're going to tailor the sort of letters and help us with that. So they've had a lot of experience dealing with other MPs in the past and things. So I think they've got really good experience they can draw on to how best to engage.
Can I quickly ask what specifically this would involve? When and how much time commitment?
Not sure. I don't know.
Okay.
Keith, do you have a better idea?
Well, for the people who are acting as leads within each constituency, you've got to build a small team, do some leadership. I guess probably a few days a month, increasing as it gets nearer the time when you're actually trying to organise stuff. You can probably go at a fairly relatively relaxed pace if you start trying to have individual face-to-face meetings with candidates and MPs and producing the literature. But the fixing where you're going to have your hustings, getting a place where it can be done, getting a commitment from the MPs and candidates to turn up early on, I think is quite important. So I see that, unfortunately, it's going to be a sort of a ramp up of effort towards when you have the hustings event. That's why I quite like having the support of these people from Hope for the Future. Well, one thing I forgot to say earlier, clearly a really good question to ask as candidate is, do you support the Climate and Nature Bill? So there's a big link with the ZeroHour talk we had earlier on.
That's a great way into, to seeing where they stand. Claire, you've got your hand up.
Yes. Can I just ask the hustings? Are they going to sort of have a title? Are they going to be, the climate husting? Is it going to be promoted as a husting specifically about climate issues?
Yes, and I think well, we haven't really specifically pinned that down, but I mean that's the intention. Yes, there's going to be loads of other issues. There'll be other pressure groups or whatever who want to engage with candidates and perhaps have hustings around, other things apart from climate. But I think the reason we're pushing on this is because the danger is that the climate and the nature biodiversity aspect will get pushed out. When the gun is fired and everyone's on the off, I suspect that this may well not have the priority or that we'd like to see, and is perhaps is.
So is it right to call it a hustings? Because do you want to have this before the general election's called? Because if you've only got a 3-week general election campaign, the candidates are going to want to go to hustings where they're going to get the most generalised set of voters in. So are you thinking that these are hustings or kind of pre-election hustings? Is that how you're going to do it? Because supposing the election isn't until November, which is what most people still sort of think, depending what happens. But would you be wanting to have events before November, or how would you see that working?
Question. And I don't think we've really talked about a date as such, or the timing of it. Does anyone have a specific response to that?
Claire. Hustings, yes, are close to the election, but things like the film show that Adam has organised, where he invites all the candidates along and asks them questions. I think those are really valuable at an earlier stage, because it will be difficult to cram everything into the short space between when the election is called and when you get the thing. I'm also going to mention, obviously we have a working group that people can join, and probably we shouldn't go in too much detail here because we've got sorts of things to talk about.
It's just that having I'm very familiar with the intensity when the election's called because of what's goes on in this house, and there's very little time to pack everything in. So, and especially with boundary changes, the candidate, if you're in a constituency with boundary changes, the candidates are going to want to get out into that new bit of their constituency when nobody's heard of them before. It's really important for candidates who haven't stood there before.
Okay.
So they'll be really packing in to cover the thing geographically.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. Now, I just want to. We've gone over this quite nicely. You know that there's a kind of team, Keith and sorry, my brain's gone wrong. Tony. Let's crack on. We'll probably put another shout out on email quite soon, and on our other comms media. Probably form some have a little Zoom meeting. People involved. Just want to take Shirley, and then I want us to move on, especially because we want to give some time for breakouts to talk about a huge solar farm in Wiltshire. Shirley.
Just a quick one. One of the hardest things in our experience is to decide who are the other sympathetic organisations that you should be collaborating with to organise the hustings. Because, so for instance, we had beekeepers, we had Oxfam, we had Fair Trade, but it can get a bit sensitive, and possibly some WCA guidance on that sort of thing would be useful. And then, of course, in normal times, which these are not, sometimes the parties don't call their candidates till very near. And I've reassured our local group that we treat every single candidate completely even-handedly. And then we go out to the public to get questions, which are then listed for the night. So that there is a kind of tradition with Bradford and us that you know we've done this before, but the choosing the fellow collaborators is quite tricky if they're not just an eco group but related.
Thank you. That's a really great point.
Yeah.
I mean, just a very quick example. Marlborough College have actually got a very active student politics department, and they've offered to actually host a hustings. That will be an interesting conversation there to how that gets focused on the climate. But anyway, that is ahead of us, and that is perhaps one of the challenges. But I think it's something it could be quite interesting to try and work out. Anyway, over to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Tony. It's such a big thing. I sometimes don't know how we're going to tackle it, but I think you're taking a practical approach. So are we able to just feedback to the group on the carbon literacy training that some of us did? Surprisingly large number of us did a week or so ago. It was 10 days ago. It seems like time has flown since then. Jackie, could you spend a few minutes just recapping what we did and see if there's any feedback from here from people who went or questions from people who didn't go? Okay.
Yeah, certainly.
Well, thanks.
Yep. Well, we had the meeting on the 20th of April. Quite short notice, but that worked out best for everybody's diaries. So big thanks to the 25 delegates who came. And Jen, we had it in Warminster. And Jen Gale, who you will have seen if you were at the last meeting online, where she was introducing carbon literacy training. She gave us a very good, very high speed, very concentrated, and I think impactful for all of us, 8 hours on carbon literacy. And it was also a great opportunity for lots of members to meet up who maybe hadn't seen each other in person. I certainly had normally seen people's heads, so it was very nice to meet you all. And the results of that meeting, the people who attended the training, it doesn't just finish there. You complete a document that just shows you understood the impact of climate change, and then commit to 2 pledges, one individually that you will do, and you also have to work out what the impact on carbon will be from that action, and then also one as the larger group. So everyone, bless them, has 2 weeks to do that. So that's just being done at the moment. And we also, what is exciting is quite a few people who undertook the training have been shown an interest in spreading that throughout the country. And dear Christian, who isn't here for business reasons, actually put up the challenge that in a year's time, everyone in Wiltshire should know someone who had undertaken carbon literacy training. And knowing Christian, that may well happen, because he tends to have a hotline to things being able to be made happen. So we can work with that. And I think the other good news is that Jen Gale is quite happy and keen to be involved in helping us to do the rollout. And we're just literally looking at various options. Keith has done an excellent assessment of what would be involved in running it as a project. So there's obviously lots of things to think about there. And Ruth has been looking at various funding we might be able to look at to support the project. So it's sort of watch this space at the moment, but I think I hope everybody who came found it useful. I think for a lot of you it was going through stuff you already knew, but maybe in a slightly different presentation. And I think we probably agreed that if we were to roll it out throughout the community, we would, rather than doing it in a single day workshop, we would break it up into the shorter sessions, which is the way it is more usually. It can be done as 2 4-hour sessions or 4 2-hour sessions to avoid brain death. So we'd be very interested on feedback from people who came, how they felt about it, and where we move forward.
So stick hands up. I'd like to get a feel though, because we're asking ourselves in the steering group, should we get behind carbon literacy training and talk to Wiltshire about rolling it out on a large scale with funding, and perhaps into the community, into town and parish councils and businesses and community organisations? That's a big question before us. So in a minute or two, perhaps we'll have a better feel for what people's attitude to that. So did anyone have a hand up? Kate, have you got, is that a hand?
Sorry, I can't find my little hand. I can find clapping and thumbs up, but no little hand. I did the carbon training, and it was a long day, but well worth it. Beautifully organised, fantastic materials. I've submitted my pledges, and I've paid for my certificate, so that will arrive. So yes, I am very interested in doing it. It's just funding it and time. I'm just getting in on the right networks to sort of find out who would be keen to come to do it. And so yes, a bit of push behind it with some funding. I've thought about actually applying for the National Lottery grant or something, but yeah, so yes, well worth doing. Super materials, and very glad that I can access them now.
Okay, Claire.
Yes, I really enjoyed it, and since I've been on it, I've found it easy to talk about it, which I think is really helpful, because one of the themes was talking and disseminating things. And carbon literacy training seems to have a sort of good ring to it, because people are saying, oh, the people I'm talking to are saying, would you like to come and talk to, would that be possible for my group to do? So as I mentioned earlier in the chat, I'm giving a presentation to St Mark's Church over the hill from me next month, which is causing some panic in my mind. But that's one thing I will be mentioning, because I think it's really well suited to, for example, a church environment or a WI environment, that sort of environment where you've got the same people as a sort of captive audience for several weeks running. So I was, I thought it was a very good, it kind of makes it less, oh, I'm just going off into my bubble with all the people who agree with me to talk about something. It sort of sounds really official and something that everybody nowadays needs to do. So it's the mention of it has gone down really well so far. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Next, Keith, and then Bill, and then let's make some time for the next major item.
Yeah. Okay. Just very briefly, my most impressive takeaway from the day was that Jen, who gave the course, was a very accomplished, knowledgeable, enthusiastic, energetic speaker. I've been to a lot of days of conferences and presentations in my time, and every now and again you get 2 or 3 speakers who are dull as ditch water, and it just switches your brain right off. So that was excellent. And it was nice to sit through a load of things that you thought you knew and fill in some gaps where you had some knowledge gaps. And then that prompted me to do a load of thinking about what would be involved in WCA stepping forward and saying, oh yeah, we could take on board that. And I've written a long business plan that won't go through here. But I think the lead thing was it's only going to be successful if you can deliver it with people of that caliber and knowledge and skill. You know, I wouldn't like to say, yeah, I'll stand up for 8 hours and go through that whole subject matter without needing to either lie down at lunchtime. So was one of the key factors. Anyway, I won't try and go through this business planning yet because we've got a meeting group about that in about 6 days, I think.
Okay, Bill.
Yeah, I'd endorse what everyone said so far, and Keith, I agree with you that it was a hell of a day, and Jane Gale held it together. She claimed she wasn't an expert, but bloody hell, she managed to, I think, dissuade us of that. She was brilliant. She was, and when she didn't know, she said so, and I think that was also very good. But she kept it rolling, kept everyone very engaged. The other thing I'd say is, and it's for discussion, as you say, next week, Keith, but I think we need to think about a CLT light, because a lot of areas you might want to go, like me, for example, going to the village hall and present to the local village about climate literacy, but they won't want to sit there for 8 hours, and they won't want to sit there for 4 hours. They may want to sit there for an hour and have a long debate, but so we've got to find a slightly different model, probably for different focus points. But that's for next week. But I think 8 hours. I came away complete. I mean, I've been in this for a long time, and it actually just reawakened everything I've been thinking about. So I actually was able to write my pages very easily because it was just all back in my head. So yeah, it was a good day. It was a very good day. And for what Jackie said, meeting people face to face, there is nothing like it. And we should do quarterly meetings of member group face to face, because I think that would make a big difference to how the group works.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. I kind of agree half and half with Bill. 8 hours is a lot. I'd rather see a sort of evening class length, even if I had to do it 4 or 6 times. Finish it. I'm not quite so sure I agree with the light version. It's like learning half the alphabet. And the content did seem to hang together in all kinds of ways. And Amber, thank you very much for a very thoughtful post you've just put in the chat. And you're inviting us to ask ourselves, what are we trying to get out of it? Education, action, etc. And I think one answer to that is that Wiltshire Climate Alliance, us, could be rolling it out in the community way faster than Wiltshire Council is ever going to even roll it out in-house, and with access to funds that Wiltshire Council can't get hold of because they're a public government body. So we are thinking about carbon literacy training as a key part of raising consciousness across Wiltshire and Swindon, and therefore I think that we're considering getting behind rolling it out, even if we have to do it ourselves, even if we have to train up trainers. And yeah, I don't know if you'd like to train up as a trainer. No, same thought here. So sorry. Is it okay, Jackie?
I was just going to say, I think one of the key things was what Claire said, is that it gives you confidence to talk. I think that's the big thing for all of us in this field. It passes a lot of shame away and identity concerns, and just gives you the power of knowledge and also just that feeling that you can go out and talk about stuff. That's certainly the difference it made to me. That's why I'm here. So
you just friendly Bradford and Avon is I'll come to you in a sec, Amber, is getting a training delivered to women called Up Front, which is specifically addressed at confidence, and as many people who are members of Climate Friendly Bradford and Avon at the time in one cohort will be able to take this training free because Climate Friendly Bradford and Avon had some funds. So I can actually put an email address in the chat if people wanted to contact our chair, Vicky Stone, and become members of Climate Friendly Bradford and Avon, even if you don't live there, in specifically to take this brilliant upfront confidence training aimed at women, young and old. And there it is in the chat. Sorry to keep you waiting. Amber, go ahead.
No, sorry. It was just a bit of a follow-up, really, to Jackie. But is that difference between chatting and the confidence to have those discussions and general chats with people, which was great, but at that very different level of training. And again, I think if there is a plan to do it as official training, you do need to have very good presenters, facilitators like Jen. You know, she's a different level to probably most of us would be on here, and that's a very different step than, okay, maybe it's a different group that we could do. So maybe your local kind of scout group or whatever could be the likes of us going and having that chat, where that confidence level doesn't have to be as high, because the scouts are going to ask silly, like, good questions, but they're not going to be like checking you and fact checking you and things like that. Whereas if you're doing it to the local government or council or whatever, you do need to know the stuff. So again, I think maybe there's a different tiered approach that we could think about.
And you can design courses for your audience. So they already have a parish council one, but if we decided, we were discussing in a meeting the other day, gardening groups, you know, we could have carbon literacy for gardening groups, you know, as a way. And obviously they have many concerns, but you can tailor a lot of the content too, but you're still covering the broader, and that will again start to address the wider community beyond our climate bubbles, which is the challenge.
And just a personal thing, the thing that moved me most about that training was when she said how to talk to other people, friends, family, workmates, or anything, or people you haven't met before. And she said how to talk to them about climate is to listen to them and ask them about climate. And I think listening probably works its magic, which is something I often need reminding. Now, so if we can move on to item 4 on our agenda, which is Lime Down Solar Park, but I'm not sure, folks, have we got a person to introduce this one? Because I think Sophie couldn't come to this meeting. Are we okay to go ahead with this?
Yeah, Keith, let Keith go first, and I'll pick up if we need to. But it's only a short piece, 5 minutes, 10 minutes most, just to discuss it. Go on, Keith.
Be as brief as I can, because some people will be aware, others won't. Lime Down Solar Farm, very big projects based in my part of Wiltshire, which is mostly impacting the South Cotswolds voting constituency. Project proposal by a big financial group to put down a very big solar panel farm on fields between Shurston, north of Lavington, out to the west of Malmesbury. 2,000 hectares, I believe, of solar panels with a power of 500 megawatts. To put that in scale, most of the solar farms that you see around Wiltshire are sort of 1 or 2 fields, and typically something like 35 to 50 megawatts. So you're talking about something 10 times larger than the next comparable project already working in Wiltshire. It's big business finance from an organisation called Island Green Power, who have a range of different financiers in them. One of those called Macquarie, who were a big investor in Thames Water. That's getting a load of negativity. The project financiers and developers have already got, I think it's 6 or 7 farmers to sign up agreements to say that they would lease their fields to them for the duration of the project, and have signed off for some, literally sold the farm to get income for the next 20 years from making solar panel in that part of the country. As it's of that scale, it doesn't get anywhere near Wiltshire Planning Department. It goes straight to the national planning requirement if it's above 50 megawatts. NSIPs, nationally
significant. Infrastructure project.
Infrastructure project, nationally significant infrastructure project. They open says NISP, but it's actually NISP. So that would go to the Secretary of State's Planning Office and then be weighted and might go through. That's the project. It has caused a huge storm in the area, particularly in people who feel that their visual enjoyment of the magnificence of North Wilts would be spoiled, that where they walk the dog might not be as good, that we're giving up fields that produce food and feed the country in order to cover them with what have been described as large vanity mirrors by the MP for North Wilts. And that's fired off a big project called Stop Lying Down, which you wish you're going to look at, where the well-to-do, well-heeled, mainly strongly sort of traditional farming stroke conservative type people who buy big houses in Shurston and in those areas have strongly come up against it because it spoils that, it's in their backyard and they don't want it in their backyard. So there's a massive anti-campaign. James Gray, the local MP, has said he's definitely against it and he will be against it and he's helped them to organise themselves. There's people with connections because they get articles in the Times. They went up to London and did a bit of a protest outside Houses of Parliament. It's been in the press. I guess that's probably going to take a couple of years before the decision's done. So the final decision is unlikely to be done by the Conservative government. The other big factor is that to get the power from this big load of fields that produces a lot of energy, you need some very big fat cables to take it a long way. And the only place with enough power to plug into the grid is at Melksham. And those of you who know Wiltshire know that's about 21 miles away. And so they're talking about building a ditch or a trench along that way. And if that goes across other farmers' fields, that might involve some sort of compulsory access or purchase to their land. Have I missed anything, Bill? That's a quick summary.
Yeah, that's about it. There's lots of other issues and details, but I think the question for the group tonight was just a debate on how the group feels about it. We are, as a group, strongly in favour of solar where sensible, but we've put a paper together which went out last week, which explains what our position and perhaps correcting a few of the facts that are being thrown around by various people in the let's not build it phase, just to get the balance rather than to be trying to do it in a balanced way rather than a very leaning to one way or the other way. Okay. I don't think we've got time now, Andrew, to have a breakout group to talk about it, but because it's 20 past 8 already, so suggest maybe we just keep it to a short with a couple of people commenting on it.
Yes, all right. So yeah, we originally hoped to have even short breakouts, and because it's an interesting question, if you want to support something because you're a climate activist or campaigner, but the majority of the local population are not happy with it, how do you deal with that? Do you drop your support? Do you stick with it, and so on? So that's something we obviously can have in mind, even though we're not going to breakouts. So we've got Matthew and Martin. And Matthew, am I right that as an independent Chippenham Town Councillor, you've put out an open public statement about Lime Down and why you support it?
That's correct, yeah, and it created quite a bit of interest. I mean, I guess like a lot of you, I saw the posters around in the fields and the houses, and I started to get quite frustrated. And then I was made aware of the two MPs and also James Adnam, a Wiltshire councillor who I've nothing against. I've never met him, but he was also sort of strongly against the Melksham side of things, and there were some errors in their statements. It seemed, as you say, and I just wanted to put out a counter. Really, I look at the carbon budget as you all do, and I work through the numbers and think, well, we're never going to fix this unless we do this kind of large scale farm. And I do understand, as you say, it's a very, very big scale project, and I get their account of views. But the interesting thing was the in putting up this blog post and just posting it a little bit on the notice board as a response to some of the Stop Lime Down publicity. I was contacted by a guy called Craig, who, as their PR contact from a Foss farm, I think, and I believe that his brother-in-law is the guy who wrote a Daily Mail article. So I'm not sure if he's sort of ground zero of the campaign, but he's you know, quite onto it. So he requested a meeting, and I thought, okay, fair enough. You know, I could talk to people, walk it in someone else's shoes, understand their perspectives. And then since that initial request, we've never actually had a date agreed, but I've been sent various bits of research. One of them was a paper on albedo effect of solar panels, which was quite interesting. Another one was from the Global Warming Policy Foundation, which was essentially climate change denial. We all know that group, I think, you know, but it was very much, you know, we don't want to do this, and is it really a problem anyway? And then I've only just picked up that the third one was the Friends of the Earth paper on solar, which, as far as I can tell, seemed to support the scheme, but he obviously thinks there's a reason why it doesn't. So yeah, I think the general feeling was that probably a meeting wouldn't lead to anything. I'm not quite sure what the outcome would be of that, really. But yeah, I just wanted to put the counterpoint, and it's obviously raised some interest. I mean, the town council would have no part in it anyway. I don't think, as you say, it's national infrastructure, and I just purely put it out really as a climate perspective. But yeah, it's raised some interesting reactions.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Martin, you're Wiltshire councillor for Shurston, are you? And you live in Shurston near Malmesbury. What are your thoughts?
Correct. Well, yeah, and I'm also you know, the main organizer of Sustainable Shurston, so you know, done lots of good stuff along those lines in the last few years in our area. So yeah, this is a very difficult one to navigate because, as you say, well, as Keith has pointed out, you know, it's a huge project. Just as a correction, I think Keith, I think it's 2,000 acres, not 2,000 hectares. But he's right. There's from what I know, there's yeah, it's basically big business, Australian bank that's plundered Thames Water. It's offshore energy company that probably never ever pay any tax to the UK, and it's basically 9 large landowners who will be looking to rake in substantial amounts of money for 60 years. This project is a 60-year project. So the key issues for me that it raises is that we just don't have a plan for how to roll this stuff out. You know, we've got a whole mix of different types of agricultural grade fields in potential scope here. Some of them are, yeah, grade 4, so that's probably you know, okay to put solar panels on, but some are very definitely not. You know, there's grade 3, could be 3A. But you know, there's no real guidance as to where this stuff should go, and I'm sort of aligned with the Campaign for Protection of Rural England. You know, they're saying that 50 gigawatts of the government's aim of 70 gigawatts solar by 2035, they're saying that 50 gigawatts should and could go on roof spaces of residences, shops, factories, public buildings. And I'm thinking, yeah, you know, we should, the government policy should be incentivizing people to do more of that, because it's a much more fair and just transition, because we're asking the whole country to make changes. And if we actually help them putting panels that they have, that they benefit from, their energy bills are reduced, you know, for the foreseeable future. Whereas huge schemes like this, yep, they contribute to the, you know, the renewable energy that we've got as a country, but you know, it won't affect any of our bills. It won't help any of us here in this call or anybody out there. It'll basically, most of the money will go to Australia, go offshore, and go to, as I say, very well-off landowners in and around Shurston, Malmesbury, Colston, Rodbourne, Lavington. So I've actually come out publicly against it because I don't think this is the way we should be doing renewable energy. You know, to my mind, you know, I just asked lots of questions as well. You know, why is the government still stalling on community energy? You know, why are the legal frameworks not in place where that is so much easier to do? Why are they not, you know, accelerated a plan to beef up local grids? You know, because you know, if that could be done, we wouldn't need these huge schemes. We could have solar on roofs. We could have batteries in existing local grid substations. They could try and balance it all off on a much more local basis. We wouldn't need 20-mile cables that need to be cooled because they get so hot going down, you know, to Melksham. We wouldn't need perhaps as many of these huge battery farms that you know we're told we need. So yeah, I just think, you know, renewable energy is such an opportunity to change the way that we do electricity generation and energy generation, that I think this sort of scheme is absolutely not the way to go. So there you have it.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Very clear. Let's have two more, and I'll try and round this up. Shirley.
Oh, thank you. I've taken the opportunity to really push home how unwise it's been that onshore wind hasn't been available because of the so much less land would be taken up with an equivalent power production if we had more wind turbines. I've also taken the opportunity to push the insulation question and the fact that, you know, the Code for Sustainable Homes and abolishing that was absolutely ridiculous. And it's interesting that even quite uninitiated people are very supportive on those two points. Thirdly, I'd say that at this stage, the scheme is incredibly lacking in detail. So even a half-hour conversation with the ecologist, one got nothing out of. Fourthly, as a Melksham Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group member, we're really cross that there seems to have been no effort to look into brownfield sites just north of the battery storage area that's proposed for just above the pear tree in Whitley. There is the old quarries where all the stone was quarried, and there is a disused sewage works and other things that could have been looked at as possible sites for. It would have made no difference the cabling because they've got 3 different possible routes for that at the moment. So yes, I have some sympathy with the opposition, but only at this stage. I think when we get more information about the whole scheme, we might be in a much clearer position. But it is a good opportunity for pushing the ridiculousness of all that's been going on in the last 15 years.
Thanks very much, Shirley, and lively debate in the chat, which is good because it saves time. Mel.
Thank you. I completely agree with Martin, actually. I have already responded to this, totally against it, because it's completely off the wall. It's completely out of scale. I completely agree that solar panels should be mandated on all roofs, including schools, hospitals, all new building. I read somewhere that Wiltshire is already something like 54%. The figures could be wrong, but there's a huge amount of land now taken up with solar or proposed solar. It's industrializing the countryside. It's wrong. I can totally agree with wind turbines, onshore wind turbines. You can combine a whole range of stuff with that. You're so limited with these roofs and with these solar fields, and what you're looking at is battery storage, etc., is total industrialization. And the other angle is the food. We are very short of food production land in this country, and we need to keep it. I'm afraid this is a cynical ploy by an Australian company to just And it's easy to convince farmers who are having a hard time at the moment, you know, to sell off their land. So I'm totally against it, I'm afraid.
We had a real exchange of views, and very polarized the views they are too. What I want to suggest is, your hand still up, Mel? We CPRE, and now, sorry, let me get this straight. Our energy group in Wiltshire Climate Alliance is a little bit dormant at the moment. This is a very live issue. We could do with reviving that and launching it on ahead. There is a possibility of working with CPRE Wiltshire, because CPRE, obviously because they don't like big solar farms on farmland, is keen on rooftop solar, on village, parish, community level renewables and so on. So we are allies in a way, but in the sense that we could join with them as an energy topic group here to work using their community energy visioning toolkit, which gets communities putting rooftop solar in, putting maybe ground source heat pumps in for community buildings. There are all kinds of issues about grid connection bottlenecks and so on, but maybe there are some ways of bypassing that and using the energy so locally, especially if it's not electrical energy, that you can shift to renewables community by community. Is there anyone here who would be interested in learning more about CPRE's Community Energy Visioning Toolkit, with a view to possibly joining a Zoom meeting, see if we can relaunch the energy group around community energy? And so, as well as little hands, can people wave a hand or put something in the chat, please, if they'd like that? Because that way, while the polarized views carry on opposing each other on large solar farms or parks, we can do something where all agree that there needs to be more community energy work, and it should happen urgently and quickly in Wiltshire and Swindon, I should say. I'm keen on taking that forwards because I'm being a CPRE member for a very long time. Okay, Margaret and Bill, and time's.
I've just put my hand up because yes, I'd like to join the group. I don't know if anyone else is going to go with it though.
That was why I put my hand up as well.
Okay then.
Mel.
Community energy with possibly CPRE. I talk to them sometimes, and I can email them about this. All right, and we work again. If this does take off, we'll put a shout out to members and member groups to say it's going ahead, because then you might suddenly decide that because you're in a community and you see the possibilities for energy in your community, energy generation, cost saving, community interest companies and so on, you might want in on all this. So let's hear from Julian.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say I put in the chat a link to our position paper in Mythbuster, because there's a few facts in there which we've sort of looked into, and it could be worth looking at, because I think a few of the things which shared were sort of possibly reinforcing some of the popular positions which aren't necessarily backed up by when you actually analyze it, and that's what we try to do to help people.
Sorry, my hand shouldn't be up, and I think that's we've covered that. I've got 3 or 4 names in the chat. Amy from Climate Friendly Bradford, Margaret Green, Bill, and I have all said we'd be into this. We'll contact CPRE, see if they're even doing any of this in Wiltshire, which they jolly well should, and see where we get to with that. So that's the line down item in a nutshell. Time's ticking by, as I keep saying. Is there anyone here? I've got items. The retrofit training that some people recently took, and feedback on that. Just fairly brief. We want to talk about projects for the coming year, and I specifically want to ask for feedback to Wiltshire Council, because I'm meeting their climate manager, who doesn't actually manage Wiltshire's climate, by the way, just the climate team. where we are and where we want to go with other projects in Wiltshire Climate Alliance. So, retrofit training, I've got. Someone
Kate.
speak about that. Kate, brilliant.
Kate.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, yes, done it, and got my certificate and all the rest of it. Again, it was quite basic, but very well done. Very good online resources, and explained it very well. And it certainly makes me feel more confident about going out and talking to people when I do the infrared camera surveys here in Pewsey. However, there's a retrofit advisor really doesn't do anything really constructive other than having that initial conversation and advising people where to go after that. So the people who really make the difference are the people who do the retrofit assessments and the retrofit designers. And I wasn't quite sure which organisation I refer people to get a retrofit assessment. So I've still got quite a lot of questions for Nick, but I've had an email saying that he's going to get in touch with us about, taking that training further. So useful, gave me a bit of confidence, but in terms of actual skills, not a lot, other than just being very aware of when a building was built, what kind of insulation it needs, but more importantly, what kind of ventilation it needs, and the basics really, but a good confidence builder.
Thank you. So can someone like Jackie, for instance, explain anything more about CSE, Centre for Sustainable Energy, and its role in this? It does sound as if there's some, as on one or two other occasions with Centre for Sustainable Energy, we have questions as we roll along that they answer little by little. What do you say, Jackie?
I'm a little bit intrigued. I did the training just self-funding to see what it was like. I did a bit of digging around because it was under a scheme called LEAD, Local Advisor on Retrofit, basically. And it seems to me that they were actually encouraging us. They paid for the training to be able to encourage green open homes being done throughout the county. Well, we've kind of done that already. So I think they've given us they've awarded it to us in retrospect, but that doesn't mean to say we can't really move forward on what we do, how we move forward on communicating retrofit. So I think it'll be interesting going back to CSE and kind of saying, well, we're going to move forward with green open homes anyway, but how we use, 8 people who've learned more about retrofit, whether we're running small meetings prior to green open homes events might be a way forward. Certainly having a phone line, and maybe looking at further training, as Kate says, to just expand on it. I was a little bit concerned because a lot of it was about PAS 30 and PAS 35, which is going to be completely redone. They've already produced new guidelines. So from next April, what we all learned about will no longer apply. So I think there's certainly a few questions, but as Kate said, it's a good background, it's a good introduction, but I think we could learn more to have more of an impact on helping retrofit being rolled out throughout Wiltshire, which is what we need.
Phil.
No, just a quick one. Anyone else from any of the other groups have their training, and what do they think about it very quickly? And then what I'll try and do, as I said I would do before, is join you all up on a WhatsApp group, because then you can have chats about where to go next. Anybody else want to say anything? If not, don't worry.
I'll just mention that I did the cheese project training, which is more hands-on with a thermal imaging camera and a draft creator. But again, we just make recommendations, and it's up to people. We can't make recommendations on funding or even on who will come and do the DIY. So that's not the same training. Anyone else on that then? We'll leave it there. Bill, you're going to, you have somebody has a list of all the people in Wiltshire and Swindon who have been trained. And if a sound is criticizing Centre for Sustainable Energy. Nobody's perfect, least of all Wiltshire Climate Alliance, and they have been extraordinarily generous to us with funding that's going to enable us to do some massively effective things that we haven't been able to do since we were formed, 4 years ago.
Yeah. Did I pick up the list, Andrew? Should I pick up next item?
Yes, please, please.
Okay. What I'm going to do is just work. There's a list. Could you put it up, Julian? Did you manage to get it?
Yeah.
Screen-wise?
I've got it.
Anywhere you like.
What I sorry, it's gone. I think you need to start, Bill. I'll try and put it up again. I put it in the chat there. If that's helpful.
Be more helpful on the screen. I can work through it then.
Well, I mean, I can share the table, but that's got lots of other stuff in it, hasn't it? I'm sorry.
I'll show the table. It's fine. We'll go through it.
Bill, you were taking this through, or Julian?
Yes, I am. I'm just waiting for Julian to put the screen up.
Okay, sorry.
Go on, Julian.
Right. Can you? It's a bit small in the middle there, isn't it? Let me try and make it bigger. Can you see that?
I'm seeing a black screen.
There we go. Okay, good. We got it. Okay, so that, if you look on the left there, there's a number of projects which are highlighted in blue, which Julian's very kindly done. We've done the first 3, really. CLT and Retrofit, we talked about. The general election group, that's going on. So they're all running. Energy group restart, we just talked about, because actually there's a lot of things we can do there. Community energy of all types, I think, is really what we want to be looking at. And a lot of people are keen to talk about it, but I think we need some people to actually help chase things around and push it out to our groups and our local communities. So we're looking for a bit of help there, I think, other than the 4 people that put their hand up already. The next one was active travel, where I understand now that there's some big, what they call LC WIP proposals, which are preliminary active travel routes in areas. And I think it's again something that we talked about doing before, but pushing or helping to work on the local area active travel. I've given one example there of the development of the Warminster, Trowbridge, Westbury, and possibly Frome active travel thing, which was headlined in our local paper last week, where they're looking to actually join bicycleways of various types and walking routes between all of those 3 and possibly 4, because Frome's in Somerset, obviously. But again, somebody can actually perhaps work on that. Yeah, I'd step past the EVs. That's a personal thing, but I'll leave that for the moment. And then we've got the local plan and local transport plan, which we had to do a lot of work on last year, or the local plan we did. The local transport plan hasn't actually come out to consultation yet. But the local plan is likely the only to come out in Q4. And we've asked some questions recently of the council, and I haven't got any answers back on that yet. But when that arises, then we have, I think, a team of 10 people working on that last time around. So we may have to call upon depending on what comes back out, it should be going straight to the government for review. But the potential is, I think they've taken over a year, would have taken over a year if it's in Q4, to review the consultation from last year. It's going to bump into probably the general election and maybe even the local election. So God knows when it's going to come out. I'm just putting that up there. So that is a project that as soon as it does become live, we'll have to work on very seriously if we want to get our comments out to a government inspector. And I think the final one, the local transport plan, they're not come out at all yet. And I think that's something that probably will pop out of the woodworks, and we'll just have to grab it when it comes. And we'll put a notice out. And the final one on the list is re-engagement. I would say engagement there, but actually we have engaged several times with the council over the years, many times over the years, and it's fallen away for the moment. And I think we do need to get back into the mode of having this constructive dialogue with the council, be the critical friends, point out where they're not doing it right, and hopefully push them on to doing it properly. And again, people to help. So there's a long list there of things that potentially could become projects, and I'm just leaving it out there for the moment. I don't think we've really got time to debate any of them tonight, but it would be interesting to know whether anybody has any strong feelings and therefore would be prepared to commit to working on any of those particular actions. And I suggest if you have at the moment, just put it in the chat. Or if you want to talk about it now, I'll leave it to Andrew to take you through it to see where we get to. So I'll pass you back to Andrew.
Okay, I'm just putting just a minute. Sorry, yeah, I thought I was muted, and I was just putting a post into the chat. We do have a cabinet member for the climate. I've misspelled his name. Dominic Munns is his name, not Dominic Runs. I think there was a bit of spell checking there going on in the chat app. So, and I'm supposed to be, as chair, I'm supposed to have an informal talk with the head of the climate team shortly. And so we probably will have to keep re-engaging with Wiltshire Council continually, especially because they have turnover of elected members and staff and so on. I hate seeing my name 4 times in the list on the right. I can coordinate and chair meetings on local plan. I'm one of the people who did lots of written work in the representations we made. I think, Bill, you were the hero that pulled it all together. Nasty job, but somebody's got to do it. What do you want me to say next or ask next, Bill?
I'm only asking for anybody to commit to something if they would, but I'm not sure we'll get that far tonight.
Okay. So energy group restart community energy. Clearly I covered that a few minutes ago in suggestion of engagement with CPRE. Active travel. This is something that Margaret has and Margaret have both put something in the chat about. And I'm also keen on this active travel routes. Although I work within my town, Bradford-on-Avon, on active travel routes in the town, I also do think that they're important in between towns. So when you say yes, me too, thanks, Mel, in the chat. Oh, that was direct message. What you should message me to tell me what you were saying yes, me too about, if you get a chance.
Sorry, I meant I need to go now. That's all, Andrew. Sorry.
I thought you were also opting into one of these working groups. Thanks for being here, Mel, and thanks for speaking out the way you. Okay. See you next time, we hope. Okay.
Okay, you can take that down now, Julian.
All right. Well, and I had a specific ask. A quick phone call from Lynn Trigwell of Wiltshire Council Climate Team, which is they're going to want to hear from us, our members and our member groups. What are our current frustrations with Wiltshire Council? What would we like them to do? And apart from everything, look at the expression on your face, Shirley. Thanks. Oh, no, we're not frustrated with Wiltshire Council. We're not frustrated in any way about the climate emergency, are we? No. Or national or international progress? No. And it strikes me that climate action in an area like this, the trouble with solar farms and all those other things is we're doing it for the sake of the rest of the world, in the hope that the rest of the world will also take our lead and do it for us, because climate action in Wiltshire doesn't guarantee Wiltshire be in a bubble of nice climate separate from the rest of the world's atmosphere. So it sometimes is not palatable action, and it's got nothing to do with local spaces, whereas biodiversity action can be very much to do with what's local. So frustrations with Wiltshire, and do take another look at their climate strategy delivery plan, which was 2022 to 2024, because this year they're going to proceed to review it, and they would very much like to hear from us on what we think of their climate delivery plan while they write another one. Some of it has just fallen flat, some of it they're behind, and some of it they're ahead. So that's something very specific. Anyway,
how do we know that, Andrew?
What?
How do we know that some behind, some have fallen flat, and some are ahead?
I gave
you got backside information from somebody.
I gave a couple of pieces of feedback to the climate person, and one was there's an action where every area board which has waste as one of its priority themes will agree to do certain things. Now, none of the 18 community areas has waste as one of its priority themes. Not last year, not this coming year. So that action is a non-action because there are no entities that can take it up. Another one I mentioned was one of the benchmarks for success was how many LC WIPs, local cycling and walking infrastructure plans, get written each year. I don't think how many plans are being written is a good measure of climate action progress. It would be something to do with things that are implemented under these plans. This is why Wiltshire Council scored high in the benchmarking in the first year when you were scored on your glossy new plans, and how they plummeted down to somewhere around the middle in the UK, or was it in England, on their actual achievements under the plans. So frustrations with Wiltshire Council, preferably something specific, or things you would like them to do, or what would people like to say to them? Speak now, or put it in the chat, or please let us know quite soon by any channel that you like. Here's two very satisfied customers, and yet you have frustrations with Wiltshire Council. Keith, and then Margaret, please.
Wondering if we were able to pull out a sort of 5-point measuring device that we could use to hold them to account of real things like you've just mentioned. So how many actual council properties have been retrofitted? You know, how many of their staff have actually been trained on climate and literacy training? You know, I'm sure if we got our heads together, we could come up with maybe 5 or 6 absolutely key measures and do a nice little graphic. This is where you said you'd be. This is where you are, and just have it as a, I can't remember what they call them. You know, those sort of things that big marketing firms are really good. Actually, Wiltshire Council are quite good at producing these one-page things covered with pictures of tractors and trees growing and lots of green print. But it's the data that's in there that's good. Maybe we could do that. It's just an idea.
Good idea.
Yeah, I did you know, the council scorecard. I pulled out the ones where they were all in the red, so we could use that as a starter to see what we're most minded about, because that covers all the areas. I can share that with you, Keith, if that would be helpful.
I think back last year, was it October, November? I think we even do a press release on Wilts Council does abysmally badly, and it's another great example of doing a load of work on a press release that it landed with a tiny splash about as big as a midge landing on the surface of the sea. You know, that's the problem. We seem to be pretty crap at getting a big splash from a load of work. So I think I'd love to talk about that. Yeah. I think they do look at the climate scores, but then I'm not sure it ever gets in the press much. Anyway, yes.
There's a a starter for where it shows where they were doing badly. We don't have to do all of it, but just say, oh yes, it can be an aid memoir, you know, a starting point.
I think our reference should probably be that benchmarking exercise as the national one, plus the delivery plan itself, which I've just put a link to in the chat. And it's not a very long document. It's like 49 pages, and some of that is either very small print or things you can miss out. It's a very well organized table of actions that we can monitor them on. Sorry, Margaret, over to you.
Yes, sorry, yes, just a quick thing, Andrew, perhaps rather too specific, but I think here in Salisbury, we're really fed up because the LC whip that we were consulted on in July 2022 still hasn't been produced. Devizes, Chippenham and Trowbridge have kind of moved ahead of us, which is fine for them, of course, but both the Wiltshire-wide LC whip and the Salisbury one, there's actually, both myself and Jimmy have put questions into Cabinet next Tuesday to ask when they're going to happen, because they don't seem to be. Mind you, it was rubbish to start with, so I suppose they've got a job on their hands, but not happy. I think you're on mute, Andrew.
I could go on forever about frustrations with Wiltshire Council. I do think that our relationship with Wiltshire Council is central to our mission, and if we can take a scrutinising, criticising role with them and support them to update their climate strategy delivery plan so that it's more effective, that'll be one of the most important things we can do at Wiltshire, at Wiltshire level. And it's something we can do that's probably small to medium sized, but incredibly important. Whereas working on the local plan review and the local transport plan when it comes out will be large to huge sized, and in the short term not very productive of action, because of course building new houses, I think only 1% is added to Wiltshire's housing stock every year. So everything that applies to new houses is rather for future decades. Enid, thank you very much for telling us you're Dominic Munns's neighbour, and I put a reply to you saying it'd be great if you could come in with us, some of us, on a meeting with our new cabinet member for what is it, waste and environment. I challenged the climate manager Lynn Trigwell by saying, well, doesn't that mean that the climate has been demoted because now it's just called waste and environment? She said far from it. Her impression of this Dominic Munns is that he's engaged. The reason there's not a new portfolio holder as well is that he doesn't want to share the responsibility. He wants to take it on board and get his knees under the table and take this whole thing seriously. He's mid-career. He's a family man with a wife and 2 young children. He's obviously got a stake in the future. And so I'm going to give this cabinet member Dominic Munns the benefit of the doubt, and we'll be able to report back to you on any meetings we manage to have with either the staff or the cabinet member. Okay. Unless anybody's got anything to add, I want to shortly declare that the meeting is successfully completed. Stop recording, and some of us might stay behind for an informal chat, especially if you have anything that your local group is doing. We say this to each other every month in the steering group. Next time we'll have local group report backs and updates at the top of the agenda. Do we ever do it? I'm sorry, no, we let you down. So watch this space for, goodness me, June. And if you have local group updates, tell us beforehand, especially, and then we can give you a decent slot to give us your update. Okay, but thanks everyone for coming. There are faces that are new to me. Enid, people who I shouldn't think are new to me. Amber, a few other names. It was great to see lots of new faces at the carbon literacy training, and I have hopes that Wiltshire Climate Alliance is currently going from strength to strength. Bill, do you want
Yeah, I just got a quick. Amber's just dropped a note into the chat. The answer on the CLT is that we've got a group, a development group, looking now at how we take the whole thing forward. If you are keen to join that group, you're welcome to do so. And I can send you a link if you want. There's a meeting next Tuesday if you want to join with that. On
carbon literacy training specifically, rollout.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And Margaret, you mentioned that you're working on a food event.
Is that a yes nod, Amber?
Yes, I'm interested, but I'm not sure I can do next Tuesday. I'll have to check. But yeah,
okay.
if you link me,
it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Sorry?
3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Definitely not. I have a job.
Oh, okay.
Amber, I looked what STFC UKRI is, and I'm very impressed.
Something
to do with science.
No, Bill, I'm genuinely interested in doing something, but in a few weeks I'll have a bit more free time. So if you can loop me in for now, and then when I'm more available, I will hopefully come and engage a bit more with you, if that's okay.
And we can do evening meetings, and I don't think there's anyone still in the meeting now who isn't doing something to do with climate or related campaigning. So brilliant, you guys. And I was quite pleased with the numbers who came to this meeting, and I thought it was exceptionally wide scope as well, with a certain amount of feisty debate in the middle. Right, so thanks a lot.
Well, might have said that was going to be deliberate, Andrew. You know.
Now, if you're canny, you'll save the chat now just before you leave.
Yeah.
And it's the 3 dots at the top of the chat where it says all members meet.